Hello and welcome to the Matriarchy. Thanks for joining us. Today we are talking about an organization that is very near and dear to my heart, the PTA. If you had to guess, do you know how old the National Parent-Teacher Association has been around? It's been around for over 125 years. Founded in 1897, National PTA is a powerful voice for all children. The PTA was founded back when women did not have the right to vote, and social activism was not popular. Two women, because of course there are women, Alice McLellan Burney and Phoebe Apperson Hearst, believed mothers would support their mission to eliminate threats that endangered children and started a nationwide campaign. 70 years later, after the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1970, the National PTA desegregated and merged to serve all children. Throughout its long and storied history, National PTA has advocated for programs and legislation that improves our children's lives, such as the creation of kindergarten classes, and has been instrumental in creating child labor laws, public health service, hot and healthy lunch programs, the juvenile justice system, mandatory immunizations, art and education, school safety, and so much more. Today's PTA is a network of millions of families, students, teachers, and administrators, and business and community leaders, too, devoted to the educational success of children and the promotion of family engagement in schools. And today, I am thrilled to introduce you to two strong, passionate leaders right here in Michigan. Hello, guys. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you for having us.
Hello. I am going to start by introducing you to Dr. Tonya Whitehead. Dr. Tonya Whitehead first began volunteering with the Michigan Parent-Teacher Association in 2009. She has served numerous roles, including secretary, chairs of communications, bylaws, and convention, has served as director-at-large and president-elect before starting her term as president in 2004. Outside the PTA, Dr. Whitehead is Associate Director of the Office for Teaching and Learning, or OTL, at Wayne State University. She's received a bachelor's in computer engineering and a master's in manufacturing and engineering management from Michigan State University. She spent several years in the IT industry, leading teams and supporting hundreds of international and domestic clients before pursuing a PhD in biomedical engineering. While completing her doctorate work, she discovered a passion for engineering education and faculty development. In addition to her role at OTL, she teaches introductory courses in engineering and participates in outreach activities through the college and Tau Beta Pi, the Engineering Honor Society. Welcome, Dr. Whitehead. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's always weird to listen to somebody read through the things you've done.
Yeah, it's a long resume because you've done a lot of very interesting things in a variety of fields, really. But before we go on, I'd really like to introduce Jenna McMechan. Jenna McMechan serves as Michigan PTA President-elect and Federal Legislative Chair, and has volunteered with the PTA for more than 15 years at various levels. While originally from a more rural area of the Thumb in Michigan, Jenna now lives in the Detroit metro area with her husband Drew and 20-year-old adult child Avery. With a background in elementary education, Jenna has found her way back to the school setting as a behavior supervisor in her local school district. She's passionate about volunteering and as a lifelong learner is someone who's always ready to grow through new experiences. Outside of her work, Jenna loves to spend time at her home with her family and cats, but also loves vacation adventures across the country, especially if the beach is near. She loves to read, crochet, experience art, binge documentaries, and visit museums. Ooh, we're going to have to catch up on some of that. Jenna is a devoted college football fan and loves football Saturdays at the University of Michigan. Sorry, Sparties, but go blue.
Exactly. Sorry, Tonya.
Sorry. We're very inclusive here at the Matriarchy, and we welcome everyone. But it's lovely to have you. And such impressive resumes. We are really in Michigan, we are so fortunate to have both of you being on the leadership of the Michigan PTA. And I don't know, we just have so much to talk about. I'm excited to start. And I wanted to start by asking you both, like, how you found your voice and who are the strong, especially female role models in your life. Tonya, you go ahead.
This is a great question. I spent a little bit of time thinking about it, but I think probably one of the biggest impacts on me was my grandmother, who was, if you meet me in person, I'm 6 foot tall. Like, I'm somewhat of a big presence, but my grandma was 4'10", like a very sweet, slight woman. But she ruled the household of my dad and his three other brothers and my grandpa very, quietly and peacefully, but was definitely the leader of everything that went on everywhere. And, even, she was born in the 20s, but she had a full-time job while she was raising my dad and my grandpa or and my uncles. So that was always part of what I saw was women doing the things that they needed to do to make sure that their families had what they needed.
Yeah, well, she sounds like a true matriarch, really, in the truest sense of the word,
Very
right? She
much
led your
so.
family. Yeah.
She was also the oldest of 9 kids, so
That's interesting. So did you feel that you were able to like use your voice? Like how was that growing up for you, Tanya?
So I got to spend a lot of time with my grandma when I was young. My parents both work, so I spent time at my grandma's house, learning from her and my grandpa as well. But she always encouraged me to do, whatever I found interesting. I would be in the garden with them. I would help my grandpa build things. He was a woodworker. So we got to do whatever was most interesting to us. Um, and, she encouraged us to share our thoughts and where we were um, as we moved forward through our lives. She was always encouraging us to get education and things like that as we moved up too.
Yeah, yeah. How about you, Jenna? Can you tell us a little bit about the important women in your life and how you got your how you found your voice early, whether it was early on or if it was a bit later?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it was a little bit later on, but oh my gosh, I didn't realize that Tanya and I have just like so much similarity in our backgrounds. It's kind of interesting. Um, but I too grew up very close with my grandma. So it was we had a lot of property. So while I lived next door to my grandma, it was across the creek, up the hill. We had ponds, we had barns. So it was a lot of extra space for me to run around and play in. And
Sounds
my
lovely. It
it
sounds like
was it was so great, and
lovely.
it's
Yeah.
so similar to what Tanya was talking about. My grandpa had his, woodworking in the basement, and so I was always down there as well. But um, just kind of like running around being grandma's sidekick and seeing how she was as a person, and she was kind of a little bit more quiet and reserved. Um, and I think she had a lot of quiet strength that whether I realized it or not at the time, all of the decisions she had to make as she was, as she had 4 young kids, all 4 girls, and when the youngest was still an infant, she no longer had the support of a man in her life. He had left, and she had to make choices and decisions and figure out how to, um do what was gonna be best for her kids and her family. And, some of those things led to great things, some of them not to great things, but I think she because of all of those experiences and I saw that I guess maybe I came to learn that she had that deep well of strength within her, and I think that those experiences that shaped who my mom was. And then so, growing up very close with my mom, it seems that I was able to pick on those as well. And I think there's a lot of quiet strength there with her as well. And so those are kind of like the women who were the most important in my life. Um, and I was a pretty outspoken kid. I had a very like a strong sense of justice. And if I saw something I didn't really like, I wasn't always a quiet, polite little child who just sat and said nothing. I really was gonna say something about that. I sometimes think about that, like, was that just me trying to be the antithesis of my grandmother who was that quiet, um, kept within sense. So I think that was kind of where I came out, but I was also very shy as well. But spending a lot of time around adults, I saw a lot of things, and I always felt comfortable to speak up about them. Um, Maybe I got a little quieter later in life, but I think I maybe not found, but regained my voice through my activity in PTA and learning
Okay.
more about what the organization was, is, and what it can do.
Well, this is a fantastic lead in. Thank you. Couldn't have scripted it better. But the PTA really has a proud history of advocating for children, for all children. So tell us, I'm going to ask each of you how you got your start in the PTA because Tonya, I know you're the proud mom of fur babies, but don't have school age children yourself. And I can tell you that I've been active in the PTA for a long time, but I most definitely got roped into it. But and that's a oftentimes what's like not it. Oh shoot, I'm the last one. I'm holding the shortest straw. But you actively chose this role of being the PTA and not a fringe, like you're the president of the Michigan PTA. So what called you to, devote so much time to this organization?
I don't know. I think I was also roped in. I just wasn't roped in by another parent in the school. Um,
All right.
but but I get your point. I actually originally became part of volunteering with PTA because of a previous state president, Teresa Marhofer, who's a very good friend of mine. When I first started helping with her, her kids were or her child was in middle school, I think. And she was involved in the PTA at the school, but is maybe not the most technically savvy person. And they were trying to put together a website. So she came to me, she's like, "You do tech stuff. Can you help with this?" And I was like, "Sure." So it was just like, it started off as, a favor for a friend. But in doing that, I got to learn about all the things they do and what what the PTA mission is, how they're helping students. Both of my parents and both of my paternal grandparents are educators. So that resonated with me a lot to see, that we're trying to continually improve education and make things better for children in a world that maybe isn't the greatest right now. Um, but I, started volunteering with her, and shortly after that, she moved into the state board, and I actually came along too. And continued to volunteer at that level for quite a while. Took a little bit of a break and then came back a few years ago and have stepped into the presidential role.
How about you, Jenna?
I think it's funny, like the roping in. Yep, that happens. I came to PTA maybe what probably many people experience. They just want to get involved in their kids' school and try to figure out, who's who, what's going on, how can I get myself connected and be in the know, um, get connected with other parents, and then just after that kindergarten year of first discovering PTA. I didn't grow up in a PTA area as a kid, so it was all just brand new to me. I got roped in to be the president of our elementary PTA.
Well,
So,
that's a big one. I think elementary is really hard to be a PTA of, but
it was a lot, but it just became my thing, my people.
yeah.
And it somehow along the way became not just about me figuring out what I can do at my kids' school. I started to learn more about like that bigger picture of PTA, that there is this state PTA that's doing incredible advocacy work for kids, and there's this national PTA that's doing it nationwide. And it just kind of hooked me and kept me in. And I was doing PTA at the local level for many years, and
Hmm.
I don't know how exactly I became on in the state level. I joined a convention committee because that's like where all the fun is. And Tanya was on that committee, and she was that committee. And it's just so much fun. And just seeing what the power of all of those people can do was just it. That just was it for me. And so what started as very, small focus, just my kid, it's really all my kids, all the kids, that really has become the focus.
Yeah, I found the more I put into like these spaces, like the deeper that I got, right? From working in, my kids' elementary school PTA, and then you do a little bit more, you become a committee chair, and then when I found the PTA council, I was like, "Oh my God, these are my people." Like and the work was fun, and I really enjoyed the people that I was working with. Look, I think it's probably fair to say that we were all the ones who did the group project growing up.
Yeah.
And I do want to get into, the PTA asks and what you're advocating for, what we're advocating for at both the state and the national level. But before we get into that, we're here on the matriarchy and we're talking about the role of women in society. And, typically our system, like our public school system, it serves children who don't vote. And it's predominantly like overwhelmingly women who are teachers, maybe not administrators so much, but also that does tie back to the patriarchy of like, well, you need, earn a little that much more money and whatever. But for a profession that's primarily women dominated and that serves children, it's like not surprising that it's not a moneymaker. We're educating kids, um, but we're not pouring money into doing that. And I do think that unpaid there's a lot of unpaid labor, primarily of women. And I think back to 125 years ago, two women are like, okay, let's call in the moms because we want to protect our babies. It's still not that much different, because that's, and I love that, right? And parents should be involved in their children's education and of course. But this isn't that, right? This is so much more. And I kind of wonder the role of this unpaid labor of women and how this has helped public education. I like for an example, I've been fortunate to be home with my kids for quite a long time. I started like you did, Jenna, when my son was in kindergarten. Oh, okay, what's all this about? Okay, what are we doing? Meeting other people and over the years, I mean, gosh, I remember one year I became PTA president at the high school. And in one year, we like changed the website. We like changed our membership program. We changed our communication program. It was like around COVID. So we established a mentor program and no one was getting paid for this. So there is a lot of disparity. And I really think that it's the PTA. And now this is the PTA that's organized this on like and can scale this up to a level, but I wonder where education would be without the unpaid labor of women. Discuss.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is yes, I agree. I mentioned my grandma was employed. She was an educator. She taught English, so she was a teacher because that was one of the careers she could have at that point. Um, and
And that's an interesting point
Mhm.
too. It's typically nurses and teachers, these caretaker roles. I mean, educator, yes, but in large part caretaker that were that was okay for women,
Yeah, there was a
right?
very prescriptive space that women could be in if they needed to be employed in some way. Um, she was also an extremely talented musician and did some stuff in that space too. But, um, you know, having putting that in the space of it's okay for women and we're not going to invest in much in it because, not necessarily because, but in theory, because, women don't need to have that income, and so they can pull this around, but still we're putting the weight of what's going to happen with the next generation on this unpaid or minimally paid labor. And there's so many community things that happen because we have space for that unpaid labor. But as our world becomes more and more and more productivity focused, I spent a lot of time thinking about this. Sorry. Um,
No, I do too. I'm so glad to hear this.
a lot of those spaces where community was built, and thinking about other people and making connections with people is going away because everyone has to focus on being productive all of the time. There's no space for that community. And I think that's degrading a lot of things, unfortunately. But to your question of where education would be without some of this unpaid labor, who knows? I mean, we may all be learning from AI by now if there wasn't this space in there. It's hard to say, or still in one room schoolhouses and trying to figure out where we're going
Mm.
next.
What about you, Jenna? What do you think?
Yeah. Man, that really makes you think, huh? That's a good one, Kath. What's interesting is, not only does this unpaid labor come from PTA volunteers like all of us, um,
Hmm.
whether we're, going in and supporting programs in the schools or raising money to financially contribute to something in the schools. A lot of that unpaid labor, I think, comes from our educators as well.
Yes,
When you think
absolutely.
about it, because of course they're earning a paycheck, but there is so much beyond those in the class moments that they're doing, that they're expected to do, that they need to do to really be effective in classrooms. So, with a lot, especially at my level in the elementary, a majority of the, school employees are women. Um, and so while they're paid women who are teachers or support staff, that school would not function if they were not doing more beyond the hours that they are getting paid for. And I think that's just like that really makes me think, your question makes me think about that is we've we've not made educating our children a focus. We're not fully supporting it. Um, and we're expecting more and more, but we're giving less and less.
Yes.
Um, and so I don't necessarily know what it would look like, what schools would look like, but knowing so many women and so many passionate women in education,
Hmm.
I am so grateful that those people wouldn't just let it slide and wouldn't just let it go. They're gonna keep giving. And unfortunately, I think
But they're
that's
going to burn
kind
out. But they're going
yes,
to burn out
yes.
doing it, though.
Yeah,
And
and
this
I
is
mean,
why
I think
teachers
that
are
we're
leaving.
experiencing that burnout, and great teachers are leaving. Um, it's not very attractive to go into a career that you have to work outside of work hours and not get paid. So
Yeah.
that's just, I
Or
think,
have a literal second job,
yes,
to make ends
so
meet
many do.
too.
Yep.
I do think about this a lot. When I was looking to go back into the workforce, I looked to getting a teaching certificate, or I looked into being a paraeducator. And at the time in my district, paras were getting paid like $11 an hour, and I was like, nope. Like it is not for the amount that I'd get paid. Like it almost has to be a calling.
Yes. Hmm.
And that it shouldn't be like that, like, yeah, of course we want people that care about kids to be in these jobs, but we also need to pay them a fair and living wage, and we need to attract people who are educated into these jobs. And it's not enough. It's not enough for the conditions, often that you have, because it's not an easy job in the best of circumstances. Kids are hard, parents can be tough, but right now, like, our schools feel a bit under attack and underfunded. Like, it's a whole thing.
A huge whole thing. Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Agree.
and I think it's also contributed to Like I'm in Rochester, Michigan, and it's a big district. We have 15,000 students, and we have, I think, 13 elementary schools. Well, in the more affluent areas of our school district, the more affluent elementary schools, the PTA can do a fun run and collect several $1,000s, enough to like, boom. And you've got, to what we were talking about before, you have maybe a well-educated woman who's home with her kids who can do this kind of labor unpaid. And then you can see how the system plays out, because in the less affluent schools, they are on the struggle bus of the PTA of trying to earn enough money. And I think you can see that not in the amount of care that kids are given, because we all love our kids, but maybe in some of the programs and some of the extras. Like, I feel like PTA gives this space, and it can scale so that you give support to have like this breathing room in our public schools. Am I seeing too much into this? Like, what do you think?
No, I don't think so at all. And I mean, even beyond just the money that the PTA can make, we know having parents involved, having parents in the schools results in better student outcomes. So when parents are in that position where they can do that, they're not working two jobs, or they, have a single income household and that works, then they can do those things. They can be more attentive to their children. They can be in the classroom as well. Whereas other districts, that's just not feasible for those parents. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, their students suffer by no fault of their own. I want to be clear.
Yeah. So, having said all this, like, it's a bit of doom and gloom, but not really, right? Like, we love our PTA, we love our PTA parents, and all that we do for our kids and for our school. But the PTA is special, right? I've moved around, so I've been in PTAs. I don't think I was in a PTO. I think these were all PTAs. And the difference is that, some of the money does go back to the state and then on the federal level, which makes this advocacy possible, right?
PTA membership, PTAs across the state are all connected, or across the country are all connected. From your local unit, you mentioned council. A lot of large districts have councils, and then we have the state level, and we're connected to national level. So part of the dues that members pay, because PTA is a membership organization, go back to the state and go to the national to support things like folks from the state doing advocacy in Lansing, or in DC, where we're fighting to improve the education for all children, not just our school and not just our individual children.
So this leads in super nicely. Boy, you guys are amazing. You just make my job so easy. But I had the absolute honor and pleasure of joining both of you, and a group of 15 of us from Michigan at the Federal Legislative Convention in DC. And this was in early March. There were hundreds of PTA members from around the country. I believe all 50 states were represented. And I would love to talk a little bit about what is happening on the federal level. Like, what is the PTA advocating for on the federal level?
So there's a lot of big things right now. Sorry for the deep breath.
How much time you got?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of the big headline catching things right now are, keeping the Department of Education, because it's so critical to a lot of those students that we were just talking about that might be a little more at risk, along with, keeping the Department of Education, funding things like IDEA. Jenna might be able to tell me what that stands for. I just remember the acronym.
Yeah. So IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
Thank you.
Which, without those programs, so the federal government and the Department of Education has a promise and commitment to fund the IDEA. 40%, I think, was the promise, and it's never been there. I
Not
think
even close.
12%, 14% was the most recent number, so that all students across the board can access public education. So whether they need additional supports, if they have any type of disability, cognitive disability, emotional disability, whatever the disability may be, we need to make sure that those students get that same opportunity to be educated. And that's what IDEA allows and enables to us in public education to do. It's really important that it's funded, and it hasn't been. So that's really taking away from all students to kind of backfill that.
And the IDEA just celebrated its 50th anniversary. So before 50 years ago, we just simply didn't educate every child. We didn't have to. Kids would, you know, it was not a good scenario if you weren't a typical child living in a typical household. And I do think that education is the cornerstone of our democracy, right? And so what are we doing? Why why are we not making this a priority?
Well, and even beyond not making a priority, chipping away at it even more with the voucher programs that are coming up that are taking even more money out of public education and putting them into spaces that aren't required to cater to or to make it education available for every child. They can pick and choose, which just disenfranchises even more children, and puts even more pressure on our public education systems.
So tell us a little bit more about the federal asks. So there's fully funding ID. A lot of it's about funding and insurance. And the other part about the Department of Education that I think a lot of people don't realize is that it also houses the Office of Civil Rights. So you're ensuring that not only kids have access to education, but that their plans are being followed through. In this past year, the Department of Education, they cut their staff by 50%. And I think Title I funds which are funds that support the lowest income, most economically vulnerable schools, that's being threatened under the OBBA, right? The one big bill. I
That
won't
one
say it.
bill.
I'm not gonna
Yes.
say it. I'm not gonna say it. So what's going on with that?
So Title I funding, like you said, is specifically for our most at-risk districts.
Well, when I went to that one session in DC, I asked, like, when are we going to see the changes, right? Like, it was this very depressing, hour of a highly educated woman telling us all the terrible things that were happening with education funding. She seemed so down. And I was like, so when are we going to see? Because sometimes you don't see it for, X amount of time because, you're already into a school year. She was like, oh, July 1st. We'll know July 1st what's in the budget and what's going to happen for next year. I'm like, oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I think it's particularly interesting that most of the things that they put in there don't take effect for a couple of years. So it's going to take a minute for us to see those changes. This next school year, we'll get the first bump from changes through the OBBBA. And then many of them don't even take effect until after 2028. So we'll see even bigger changes after the next federal election when it's maybe too late to fix the problem.
So, some of the other things that we talked about in DC when we met with legislators were protecting immigrant children. What were some of the other things that the PTA is asking for on a federal level?
So the three big asks were maintaining the Department of Education, refunding SNAP, so making sure that we have enough money to feed all of our children because
Mhm.
hungry children don't learn.
Yeah,
Um, we know that if your fundamental needs aren't met, you just don't have the capacity to learn at the level that you can. So that
yeah.
has a huge detriment on students' outcomes and success as well. And then the third one was to protect sensitive areas, so schools, hospitals, things like that, from immigration enforcement activities. So making sure, again, that our students aren't as worried
Hmm.
about getting done with school and not having parents at home. Or there's a lot of students we know across the country who are not going to schools for these reasons because their parents are concerned about, leaving the house to take them to school or
Yeah.
something happening to them in between. So making sure that children, regardless of their immigration status, regardless of their socioeconomic status, regardless of their individual needs, are getting an education so that our country can continue to be as productive as possible. So everything that the PTA does kind of rolls into that bigger idea. Our motto is every child with one voice, and we really do mean every child. And making sure that we're helping all of them and raising all of the students to be as successful as they can be.
And, the PTA, not every school has a PTA, but yet the PTA really advocates for all public schools, all children.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about statewide advocacy. Since you're both the president and the president-elect, Jenna, what are you getting yourself into here?
Right? There's still time. I still have time to learn. Um, thankfully. Um, statewide, we were just talking about like SNAP and things like that. And being in Michigan right now, I don't know if it's lucky, but we are committed to making sure that all of our students are fed in Michigan. That's great, but it's not permanent. So I mean, that kind of ties back federally, but that's obviously something that we're going to be always wanting to make sure is that our schools in Michigan are fully funded, so that we can make sure that all of those things that kids need to learn, like Tanya's saying, you can't learn if you have all of these other needs. There's just no way to focus on learning and education.
So are you advocating for permanently offering breakfast and lunch at schools then? So that students aren't subject to the whims of politics, whether they're going to get a free meal at school.
Yeah. So all of those things that are like those contingency plans, we do want to make sure that those are permanent because of I think what's kind of the federal instability is going to be making us focus some of our efforts that would normally be federal asks. We got to at least start here and make sure that we are going to be getting what our kids need here in Michigan.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, if the federal government isn't providing it, we need to make sure that the state does.
Yeah, that's a start.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard because then where are you pulling that funding from? Like, and just for some context, the federal government makes up about what, 10% of total school funding?
Yeah, something like that.
So if they are not providing that 10%, like imagine any business getting a 10% hit or any percentage off the top. What's that coming out of? Right? Are you going to lose buses? Are you not going to be able to pay your parapros? It's typically the kids who are the most vulnerable will be impacted the most, typically, because of organizations like the PTA, because at the micro level, parents that are in more affluent areas can step in. We have more resources. It's just, we're talking like we need to fix systemic issues, right? What are some of the other asks for, because you have an upcoming advocacy day on April 16th. What are the asks?
So we've already talked a little bit about increasing and sustaining school funding. One of the challenges we've had in Michigan is money being slowly stripped away from the school aid fund, or the the umbrella that the school aid fund applies to just being made bigger and bigger, which dilutes the funding that goes to schools. So that's always top of the priority, is protecting the school aid fund and making sure that it is going solely to public schools as it's supposed to be. We talked a little bit about IDA at the federal level, so that gap between the 40% and the 14%, has to be made up by the the states because they still have to meet those requirements, even though they don't have the funding that they're supposed to have to do it. So that's another way that we have, struggle with funding. And we know that Michigan is on the lower half of per pupil funding for students, even though it's gotten better in the last few years. There's still a long ways to go, especially in making sure that some of the additional benefits are covered and funded. And there are some bills going through the Senate right now, or being proposed in the Senate right now, to make sure some of those things are funded. Health and wellness are the next big ask at the state level. So making sure that we are getting mental health support for students. We have bills around protecting students from tobacco that we're working towards. And there's a couple other things in that one that I'm forgetting. But
The seizure safe schools?
yes, thank you. Seizure safe schools, make sure that educators are trained on how to identify and properly support students who are having seizures. And thankfully that the
The Epilepsy Foundation?
that'd be the one. Jenna's got me.
Jenna. So does the PTA, so say, for example, for the seizure safe schools, is the Epilepsy Foundation comes to the PTA and says, hey, this is an issue. We have a solution. Will you partner with us? Is that essentially how things like this work?
That's kind of how it starts. To officially be part of our legislative landscape, for lack of a better word, we do have to do things like go to our membership and say, is this something as an organization that we want to support? So we start with finding partners and learning from them, and then take that to our membership and have them approve a resolution in support of it. So we did the seizure safe schools one 2 or 3 years ago, I think. And then it has gone on to, we tried to move it on to the national level as well, along with a couple
Gotcha.
other states. So we have kind of a formal process to do that. But the reason that we have a formal process to do that is because we want to make sure that we're representing all of our membership, not, a small minorities of people's priorities, and that they really align with the mission of the PTA.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I think there is a third big bucket of asks. Is that right? It probably mirrors the federal. Is that to do with sensitive areas as well?
The overarching is safety. So sensitive areas does fall into that. But things like school lockdown policies and making sure that we have the emergency operations and things like that in place also fall into that. So there's a lot of bills in that space actually too that are up in the legislature right now, as they're trying to adjust the way things are done at different levels, and making sure that we have the safety requirements that we now need in schools.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. Well, let me ask you, if you each had a a magic wand, and could fix something in the education realm, be it federally or statewide, what would it be?
I think
Can it be infinite wishes?
You can wish for more wishes, sure. Yeah. In this scenario, you can wish for more wishes.
To get done.
What would be on your list?
one of the things on my list would definitely be, as we talked about earlier, funding or paying teachers more and elevating just the way that the society treats teachers, and making that as valuable in the eyes of folks as, being a doctor or something like that, because I think it has, that level of impact.
Similarly, yeah, we're the same person. Uh, similarly, I would love to just be able to magically immediately fix relationships from between all stakeholders at our schools. So the respect from parents to teachers to administrators, their respect from administrators to staff to parents, so that our kids can see that really good partnership and cohesiveness in their education setting, to then see that all of those people respect each other and are caring about each other and value this experience of schools, so that our kids can see it and then emulate and model that level of respect, because the whole reason we all go to school is to learn. And there's so much noise and so many side quests, that I think that is getting missed, and and there is
Yeah.
such a lack of respect that I feel like at any level, maybe we all don't value the other's perspective as much as we could and should, to move it forward.
So building relationships, essentially. Building back trust, building relationships. It's almost like you need an organization between parents, teachers, students, and administrators to help with that.
That would be great.
Yeah, like, let me think. The PTA? PTSA?
Only someone had thought of
Yeah.
that
Well,
125 years ago.
yeah.
Brand new information.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to talk about as like the state of education or, anything you want to plug that the PTA is doing? Any programs that you find interesting or the role of Michigan in national PTA as well?
Well, before I go down the path that you led us on, um,
You like how I opened the door there?
yeah, I do want to just remind folks that PTA is a community organization. We started with talking about I don't have children. I've never had children in public schools. I'm part of the community that cares about education. So if you are part of the community that cares about education, you belong in PTA. It's not just the parents and the teachers in that particular school. It's everyone in that community that that school is part of. Or if you just care about children's success in general, PTA is a place for you. And we have statewide PTA. If you don't have a PTA in your area that you can you can join, or you can find one somewhere where a friend has a kid to join to be part of this voice that's fighting for public education.
I think that gets missed too, the community part of PTA, and especially in many areas, especially in rural areas, which we have a lot in Michigan and around the country. Schools tend to be the community, the heart of the community, right? That's where the events, the sports, the after school activities are happening. So thank you, Tanya, for not only what you're doing, but for highlighting how you don't have to have a child in the system to care about the schools and to advocate for them.
The education of our kids affects us all. The other thing that we want to highlight is that we're super, super excited that one of our past presidents is up for election to be the president-elect at national this year.
Ooh, that's exciting.
It is very exciting. So we're hoping to get a good group of people from Michigan to Pittsburgh for the national convention in June, so that we can all vote for our lovely past president, Chetan Berry, who is currently the secretary treasurer at national, and who I personally think will make an excellent president.
Would concur.
We'll put all this information about when what was it? Sorry, at the convention. What did
The
you say
national
it was?
convention, yeah, it's in Pittsburgh in June. So
Okay, and we'll link that in our show notes on our website at
awesome.
envisionthematriarchy.com.
Thank you.
How about you, Jenna? Is there anything else that you want to add? I guess what is the PTA meant to you personally?
I mean, I think for me, I just feel like I echo Tanya all the time, but we're just kind of on the same page. I mean, one of the reasons I agreed to accept a nomination to be the president-elect is because I would be able to work so closely with Shaitan and Tanya as past president, as current president,
Mhm.
because I worked so much with them in the past on the state board through different committees. And I was like, I have a lot of imposter syndrome. And I think that, I mean, so many of us do, I think. So I just love being surrounded by people like Tonya who have just such a breadth of knowledge and experience so that I just love learning. So the more I can learn, the happier I am as a person. So it's given me such an opportunity to learn new things, and it's related to my passion about caring about kids. When I was in college, I was an education major, and I had a professor say, you have to really think about why you're going to become a teacher because it's not enough to care about kids. I was like, what is he talking about? Like, this is absurd. Like, of course I can care about kids and become a teacher. I did not become a teacher for very long. It lasted a year. But what I think is great about PTA is that it has become my place to be where it is enough for me to care about kids and making sure that they can be successful in every aspect of their lives. So it became the place, and that's what it means to me, is that I have found the place where what I care about is enough and it's fitting to the whole mission. This is my place. And I think what Tanya said is, you don't have to be affiliated with a school. You don't have to have a kid who went to school. If you care about really the future of our country, because these kids are going to become that future. If you care, then you care about what PTA is doing. And you can certainly support those efforts by joining Great Lakes PTA.
Yeah. How about you, Tanya? What has the PTA meant to you?
So I agree with Jenna. I feel like this is a great space for me. I said I was raised by educators, and then I tried to avoid
Mhm.
education like the plague and failed miserably. Um, but I want to go back to something that you said earlier, Kath, that you found your people in PTA.
Mhm. I sure did.
And I think one of the benefits that I have taken away from PTA, in addition to feeling like I'm making a difference, is a bunch of lifelong friends that I would not have met otherwise. Like, there was no reason I would have met Jenna had it not been for being in the PTA, or you for that matter, probably. Um, so there's a bunch of people that are really, really critical to my life, and I would definitely put into the list of the women who have influenced me
Mhm.
and made a huge difference in my life.
And I want to go back to before I ask you like our final signature question, I want to go back to something that Jenna said about imposter syndrome. Um, I'm sure men experience this, but the level to which women seem to experience this is just, it feels higher. I remember my brother, I was applying for some job or something, and he was like, "Kath, you can do this." I'm like, "I know, but I don't know if I can do blah, and I don't have this experience." And he's like, "Oh my God, just apply for it. You'll be fine." And I think and I respect my brother a lot, right? But I just think that was indicative of like, trust yourself because you can do this. And I think the PTA for me has really honed leadership skills in a very like supportive way that I feel like, well, I'm also giving back to my community, but I've gotten so much from it myself.
If I can add to that, Kath, like I
Please.
sometimes think about it. I feel like there was a me before PTA
Mm,
and a me after PTA. And I truly, it just sounds so silly, but I truly feel like I am a different person and a better person because I found my way to this group of people,
mm,
and this organization. I fundamentally think it has changed. Maybe not change. No, maybe not changed who I am. Made me become more of who I am.
mm-mm.
Um,
Maybe revealed
yes,
who you are.
yes. And it allowed me to learn skills I maybe didn't have the opportunity to learn before, or see things about myself that I did not recognize that were there. Um, and so it just truly has made me more and better, I think.
What more could you ask for?
Not a
You
lot.
know, women supporting women. And on that note, I would like to ask both of you, what does the matriarchy mean to you?
Sure, for sure. Um, For me, I think the matriarchy is a network. Um, and I think that sometimes when I think about things, I think about the contrast of it. So the matriarchy versus the patriarchy. Um, and what I think um, the matriarchy is within that network. It's all about women sharing skills. I don't
Mm,
even think it's about sharing power. I think it's about sharing knowledge. And so being available to each other, um, finding common ground and finding differences, and then all growing with and through that together in that network is what the matriarchy is to me.
That's
that's pretty
great.
good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Thanks.
How about you, Tanya? What does matriarchy mean to you?
So I think the biggest thing the matriarchy means to me is something that fights back against all the messages that women get that lead to imposter syndrome or feeling like you can't do something like that. It gives us that foundation and space around us that fights against all the other messaging that happens and gives us the support and foundation and roots
Mhm.
that we need to be successful.
Well, I thank you both for being here. I feel like I've just got to know you both just that little bit more from that trip to DC, which was so fun.
It was.
And
So
you're my
fun.
people now.
So you're going to come to Pittsburgh with us too, right?
Yeah. I'll have to look into that. I'll be there on April 16th in Lansing, though,
Good.
We're excited to see you.
advocating
Yeah.
for, yeah, yeah. One year I took 5 students. It's always a joy to take kids to something like that because they can meet their representatives and you see that they're just people. And so, what an opportunity. I do encourage anyone to go to your PTA legislative convention, wherever you are, grab some students. I mean, hopefully, the students, right? Like, don't grab random kids.
We do
We
not
just
advocate for
talked about
that.
security and safety.
I know we are talking about security and safety. But empowering students, because I really think that when they see um, how it's just people making laws and creating policy, and that we can have an influence on that. Like, oh, there's no greater sense of empowerment, I think. And I think the PTA for, helping shape my experience as well. So, well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having
Thanks,
us.
Kath. We loved it. Thank you.
Wow, that was nice. That was a bit of a reunion with two newer friends that I made. I've gotten to know Tanya over the past couple years because of my involvement through my local PTA and state PTA, and really got to know Jenna a bit more when I went to DC with the federal legislative convention. And what a great experience. I have to say, for me personally, if I look back, I really can credit PTA with helping me in my leadership um, abilities and giving me the confidence and the encouragement um, to, when there's something that I wanted to advocate for, to help me do that. And I'm going to call out a friend, Barb Brill. Barb Brill, if you're listening, she was PTA council president at the time, and our high school PTA didn't have a president, and I was heavily advocating for school start times. As you know, this is my pet issue. And Barb said, "Well, Kathy, why don't you be, PTA president?" I was like, "Ah, no, I can't do that." And she was like, "Why not?" And I was like, "I don't know." And she was like, "You can do that, and I'll be here. I'll be here to help you." Um, and um, and I was working very closely with my friend Jane, and we were both doing a lot of work anyway. I really appreciate these women, Barb and Jane, and all the women that I've met throughout the years through the PTA, to not only help our children, but to give support to other women. Now, it's not only women. I've there's definitely been some really impactful, really helpful men who have been in the PTA. Shout out to Joel, who really helped on a recent legislation project that we were working on. But I really have to give a lot of credit to the PTA, and which functions really a lot like a matriarchy, centering children, empowering those around us, really standing up for a lot of people who can't, who don't have the capacity to use their own voice. It's really hard to volunteer in the PTA when you're holding down a couple jobs just to make ends meet. And we see you, and we advocate for all children. So, with that being said, I appreciate your time. I'm very grateful to Tonya and Jenna for being here with us, and welcome to the matriarchy and welcome to our community. Thank you.